So welcome everyone to FFCON21 panel on reimagining customer relationship and user experience in open finance. I'm your moderator, Michelle Beyo, CEO and founder of Finavator, which is a fintech consultancy largely focused on payment innovation, and also a board member for OBIC, which is an organization, non-for-profit, focused on driving towards open banking for Canadian framework and ecosystem. So really excited to be here today to introduce our incredible panelists as we guide our discussion today's topic of this open finance reimagining your user experience. And I always like to start with a little stat. So when you look to the UK and open finance, they've revolutionized their user experience, providing greater freedom and choice to their consumers since 2018. And when it comes to financial products and services, the ability to access their account in one place so they can see all of their infrastructure of all of their different products and services, and having a lot more personalization of offers that tailor to their lives and their current situation. And as of March 2021, there's over 3 million full-time users of open banking infrastructure, as well as 303 regulated providers and 6 billion API calls have occurred. So in today's discussion, I'm excited to introduce our panelists. We have Hadi DeVita, who is the Chief Business Officer and member of Finconecta. She's also a founding CEO of BetDev Solutions and has held previous roles as Chief Commercial Officer of the Digital Payments Labs of MasterCard. Welcome, Hadi.
Hi there. Thank you.
Oh, we're getting a little echo.
Hi.
Just all of a sudden, maybe some earbuds.
Okay.
We also have Hamid Arbabi, the CEO and founder of VoPay. He's recognized as a fintech industry innovator and thought leader, and is a serial entrepreneur. Welcome, Hamid.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Timothy Lee, who is the CEO of Alchemy, as well as Wikipro Inc. Timothy is also a seed investor and Sidel, as well as an investor at Honeybee Financial Wellness. Very happy to have you hopefully here now, Timothy.
Thank you. I'm here.
Wonderful. So I actually really wanted to start today's discussion with passing the mic over to each of you to give us a little bit about your current role and your company before we dive into the open finance discussion. So I'm going to start with Hadi.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Hadi DeVita. I'm the Chief Business Officer for Finconecta. Finconecta is an infrastructure company that provides API middleware to connect financial institutions, legacy core banking platforms through a switch that we've developed to a curated group of fintechs that really try and move the financial institutions forward on their digital transformation journey. In this journey, we have embraced and pivoted the open finance, the open banking regulatory landscape globally, and really look at our platform as enabling a lot of the open finance and open banking regulatory frame from a defense perspective, but also from an offense perspective, providing an ability for financial institutions to leverage some of these APIs that we've developed and some of these curated fintechs to look at monetizing their APIs and starting to look at new business lines and revenue opportunities. And so potentially a regulatory kind of challenge has also turned into a transformation challenge or a transformation opportunity for many of the institutions that we work with, and we are global in nature.
Hadi, thank you so much for joining us. And with your background at Citi and MasterCard, having a Canadian lens as well as an American lens and a global perspective is really exciting for today's discussion. So thank you for joining us. From New York all the way to California, Tim, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, and welcome to the show. My name is Timothy Lee, CEO of Alchemy. What we do is very simple. We help financial institutions and banks to build really cool products. Lately, buy now, pay later, embedded finance, point of sale financing is very hot. So we've been helping a lot of merchants and retailers to build their own financing arm. So we have software built for them to quickly launch their product. We can do the customer acquisition, underwriting, providing the terms and loans, and have them sign digital documents and figure out how those payments work. So I have this whole sort of a platform for people to launch their own product. Been doing this for about 3 to 5 years. We're super interested in open banking. We are going to announce a major partnership with a Canadian company called Flinks, which is the Plaid of the North, on Monday. So we've done a lot of work for the past couple of months to integrate fully with Flinks. So our customer can access to all the Canadian banks, just like how they will log into Plaid. So happy to be here and happy to talk about all these new technologies out there. Thank you, Michelle.
Excited. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing that announcement. Flinks, I think because it's Canadian born and out of Montreal, very widely used and well known in Canada as well. So thank you for sharing that. And then off to Vancouver, Hamid, tell us a little bit about yourself and VoPay.
Thank you. Great to be here. Hamid Arbabi, CEO and founder of VoPay. VoPay is a data-driven company. We built innovative products that reduce friction in B2B payments, and we provide APIs that connects businesses to the banking and payment networks. Open banking has a significant role in what we do and our service offering. And what we essentially do is provide data on top of existing transaction or payment rails across Canada and US. We work with almost all the open banking providers across North America, from Plaid, Flinks, Fiserv, and MX, to cover a broader range of financial institutions on our network.
Thank you, Hamid.
Thank you.
We have a wide, diverse offering of different backgrounds, as well as different service offerings that all touch the open banking, open finance infrastructure. I would like to start today's discussion on your thoughts of the current progress or state of open banking within Canada and the US. And maybe to start with you, Hamid, in your Canadian view, knowing that you work in the US as well, but being in Vancouver, compared to the world, how is North America doing in the sense of open banking?
Yes, definitely. So open banking is definitely new in North America comparing to Europe and rest of the world. We have seen how open banking has been successful and provided significant value to both customers and service providers in Europe and some countries in Asia. So and in Canada and the US, there are so many innovative companies that have built open banking solutions through the APIs, but still there are so many challenges as this whole technology is evolving in the market. The consumers are still getting educated around how they can benefit from this, as well as businesses. While regulators are trying to come in and make sure that the data privacy, security is in place across the space. Yeah, that's pretty it from me.
And Betty, from the infrastructure that you're building, your point of view, being, with all your background, being at a core bank, and then being with MasterCard and now being with a Fintech, and touching a lot of the banks, what do you think the current state of open banking is, or at the moment?
Sure. I think I love when market forces actually drive innovation, and without necessarily a formal regulatory frame, it's clear that because of consumer demand for these, frictionless experiences, and because of all of the digital solutions that are out there that we use every day, and even more with the pandemic, the requirement to have things low touch and one-stop checkout. All of the financial institutions have pressure against trying to deliver against those type of standards and benchmarks. And, our view is that open finance and open banking without the regulatory frame that very much looks at kind of governance of consumer data and ensuring that that the landscape is clear, as Europe had started to do. I think California as well, in terms of their regulatory guidelines on consumer data. You still had all of this growth and launching of these use cases that require now financial institutions to stand up and say, I don't believe that I can develop everything internally, and I have to start collaborating with these startups, these fintechs that have developed these solutions and these use cases that actually are providing better experiences than a financial institution would. So for me, open banking's got a lot of, and open finance has a lot of different things to unpack. The regulatory piece, I think Canada's actually got a bit more headway, even though it's still not there with regard to some of the documentation and papers that have been out for feedback across the industry. The US went and launched, FDX, which gives some standards to how APIs get developed. But it's really around trying to drive these new use cases that consumers are demanding, that fintechs are developing, that are challenging the banks. And I think the banks are very clear that they need to collaborate in this ecosystem, and that's driving everyone forward. We have an infrastructure to be able to help this collaboration, but at the end of the day, the market forces have really driven the movement forward, and it's great to see that there is this collaboration. I see Canada as a great market to be able to, launch a platform and a space where financial institutions and fintechs and startups can collaborate, can test, can innovate, and can ultimately adhere to the governance principles and the regulations, but also meet the needs of consumers, small businesses, et cetera.
A great overview and insight, especially into the Canadian aspect of where we fit in, even for the US. And Tim, maybe you have some additional insight, especially with that partnership with Flinks, and your thoughts on Canada.
Sure. Yeah, so it's super exciting. Just like what Betty said, the consumer demands it. And the great debate of actually who owns the data, I think that's subsided quite a bit, right? Does the bank actually own the banking transaction data, or does the consumer own their own banking transaction data? That was hotly debated for the past couple of years. And this morning, Plaid announced an open banking initiative with US Bank, one of the largest banks in the United States. They're actually going to establish a full-blown API between the banks and Plaid, as opposed to screen scraping and some of the other technology, right? That's all happening now. Hooray. I think Capital One's moving to that direction as well. So, I like to say that we're 10 years behind the UK and the EU market. So we're finally getting there. This democratization of data is key. It'll create a lot of interesting use cases, like what Betty said, faster delivery of information and therefore credit to a lot of different people. And to a certain extent, a little bit nuanced, there are a lot of people that don't have credit or a credit score, if you will, all over the world. Having lenders or creditors have a purview or access to banking information might give them another piece of data consumers to provide that credit to people. So I think it's all happening, and Flinks is definitely one of the partners we're super excited about. And I know they're are backed by a bank in Canada, so I think it'll all happen up in Canada very fast.
Thank you for that, and that's exciting news that I hadn't read just yet. So
just came out a couple of minutes ago.
Nice,
Yeah,
right on the Twitter. Thank you for that. So I'll start with you again, Timothy. But what do you think some of the products and solutions that can be brought to market in Canada and the U.S. with the implementation of this open finance framework?
Speed to access for credit. There are lots of point-of-sale financing, embedded financing use cases. Let's say I want to go to the dentist and get some work done, a couple $1,000. I don't want to spend on my credit card. I can be underwritten right there and then for that credit. And I could simply log into my bank account and say, hey, all I need to prove is my ability to repay this loan or repay this credit. You don't need to look at my credit score. You don't need to know what happened 9 years ago. I'm gainfully employed. I have savings. This credit may only last 3-4 months for me to repay it back for payments, right? So having access to bank account information or bank transactional information might be really powerful for people to get instant access to credit without having to pull credit reports. And when you pull credit reports, sometimes it impacts your credit. So I think it's going to open up a lot of different use cases just in that one credit offering space.
Yeah, I totally agree. The underserved and underbanked, I think, are going to be a huge benefit from these new services. And Hamid, in the B2B space, how is that going to drive out new services and offerings?
Definitely. Yeah. So the B2B space has been transformed since COVID started. And all the businesses had to transform to digital payments, which is our space. And one of the areas that we have found very challenging was how they onboard customers, verify their bank accounts, and prevent fraud. And all these businesses have been previously working with wire payments or checks, or basically the paper instruments that have been the primary method of payment. Through open banking, we have been able to simplify onboarding, verification of their account ownership, and to Timothy's point, it's simplifying the service offering by being able to verify additional data, which they can have access from credit bureau. And sometimes it's not the kind of the fairest approach to giving someone a facility or a service if you're just referring to the bureau, why their banking can or the data that comes from someone's banking is definitely an additional validation. So for us, what we have seen, open banking has provided significant value to streamlining customer onboarding, setting up the payments. We have been able to validate the payments in Canada, and US EFT and ACH payments are not real time, 3 days delay. And what we have been able to achieve through open banking is accelerate those payments to less than a day by verifying the transaction on the customer account. And that helps businesses with their cash flow, faster service offering to their customers. And we believe open banking gonna continue contribute to both businesses and consumers and their interaction together.
I think you're absolutely right. Obviously, COVID has driven us into the digital era times 10 years ahead. And as open banking, is an opportunity at the moment, though it's not formalized. So lots of things are screen scraping at the moment, but it is enabling still the window into the future. Betty, as you are working with current banks, incumbents, in helping them access fintechs to innovate and grow, what's your kind of view on the product and services that this is going to enable the ecosystem both in Canada and the US?
Sure. Well, I mean, I have to agree with a lot of the comments with regard to speed and, the elimination of some of this friction. One of the hot areas that we really get a lot of demand on is kind of know your customer and digital ID and onboarding. And, you could go and try and open an account today, and still there is this friction on trying to identify yourself. I think that's a financial institution challenge with regard to some of the requirement for in-person and government-issued ID, and the ability for some of our fintechs to be able to really minimize that process, the in-person requirement with these databases, using technology to be able to validate the consumer is really just a very hot demand right now. And I think it's for FIs, but I think it's for other verticals as well. I mean, imagine being able to do a test drive on a car where you're able to validate your driver's license digitally and using biometrics. So I think, there's just a ton of different use cases you can imagine. I think in the healthcare space, I think in, airport, and so I feel like that's one that is exploding. And I think Canada's got a lot of work that's been done, and a lot of, I think, wind behind some collaboration in the digital identity space as well. I think another piece that is really interesting, I mean, we're this platform of marketplace, and our marketplace is largely B2B, and we find that there's also some real interest and innovation that can happen in the SME space because they're not necessarily that well served. But we also have in our roadmap the view of a B2C type of marketplace, where you can imagine that a bank can offer direct to consumer type of services where their customers can select the type of services that they're looking for related to ancillary products that aren't necessarily proprietary to the financial institution, like insurance or a different type of reward product. And so I just think this notion of marketplaces and the ability to really accept that third-party solutions are a viable alternative to homegrown solutions opens up the notion of B2B, but also starts to open up the notion of B2C for financial institutions to start to diversify revenue and diversify product solutions as well to their direct customer.
Yeah, I think that's so important. When you look to the UK or Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Brazil, Singapore, and the UAE, embedding consumer data rights and bringing in the full implementation of open banking with read and then write access. I think there's a question in the chat about regulation defining can definitely catch up, but what is it actually going to do? And I think, from my opinion, the challenge in Canada is we have 4 million plus currently utilizing screen scraping, and I'm sure the number is in the 100 millions in the US, but they're utilizing it without the knowledge of where their data is going, having a revocable nature to it in any capacity, as well as what data points are being pulled. So I think regulation will give the opportunity for it to be a structured API that is up 99.9% of time versus screen scraping falling down, maybe 80% of the time because the banks are having challenges, and therefore the fintech has to reconnect their screen scraping infrastructure with 5 or 6 banks in Canada to allow that. And I think it's going to protect Canadians and Americans and their data in a stronger way. But Timothy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm an ex-banker. I used to work at JPMorgan Chase for many years, worked with a lot of their technology, launched Chase.com, if you will, 15 years ago. There was no online banking 15 years ago. There was no iPhones 15 years ago. So screen scraping is actually a really interesting technology where it is probably the best way to do the handshake today. Having a API to really connect to banking core technology, it's going to be very challenging because not a whole lot of stuff runs in real time behind the scenes at these banks. Everything's still on mainframes, batch files. It just doesn't update on a minute by minute basis. We think it is, but it is not. So from a data transmission security perspective, just internal regulatory regime that these banks have, it's going to take another 10, 20 years for them to really become real time. And my fear, and I kind of talked to Betty about this in a different session, is that if the bank does not make these investments, doesn't play with platforms like what Betty has put together, it might be too little too late. You got to invest in infrastructure. You got to get everything in real time. You got to use, dare I say, blockchain technology of kinds of really subtle payments, transact in real time or semi-real time. Otherwise, these fintechs, today they're playing really nicely with the banks. Tomorrow, they might be building rails around the banks, like what we've seen lately, right? So it might be a little bit too late. But again, I'm an optimist most of the time. So I think these banks are making serious investments in the infrastructure itself. The infrastructure's got to be there first. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great point. And you're right, 15 years ago, what banks didn't have online, and now they're trying to compete with fintechs, but they don't have the luxury of time. I think talking about open banking for 5 years and not moving has been a big challenge. It's kind of a global race, arms race.
I think open banking should be the bank's competitive advantage. They got to do it. Otherwise, they're gonna lose out amongst their peers, their other banks.
I think you're so right. And Hamid, just talking about US to Canadian payments, and in the chat, there's discussion about global payments. How is open banking and the infrastructure secure or more secure, as well as providing more affordable services to small business on that B2B? Oh, I think you're on mute, which is a 2021 issue that we're all having.
Sorry about that. Yes. So definitely banking and payments have very close relevancy, improve the user experience and accelerate the movement of money. But at the same time, the challenge we see currently in open banking is that lack of transparency on how the services are provided, how the data is shared, or who have access to the consumer data. So and we see that some consumers
providing their account information to the third party when receiving the payment.
So I believe education is one of the key factors that we all need to focus on helping consumers understand how their data will be managed and how their data will be stored, and who is the ultimate owner or holder of the data once it's so financial data has been there forever. Since like the banks started, your transactions and your history of banking is there, but it's about how you can have access to those data. Screen scraping has been a temporary solution. The challenge is it's unstable. There's always ups and downs with that solution. As the bank changes their interface, things break down, and our partners have to go fix that to make sure you have access to the service. So definitely API is going to play a significant role. And we are hoping by bank kind of being more positive toward taking open banking seriously and accelerate the innovation, offering the service directly to the service providers in the open banking space or payments would solve many of these issues.
Thank you, Hamid. And I know we have had such a quick session. We're coming up on time, and I'd love to go around the room and give you an opportunity to share, what does Canada need to think about as we go to try and implement open banking? What's the most important thing you believe, with your history, your organization, to ensure that Canadian consumers and small business and banks and fintechs all flourish? in the future? And maybe I'll start with you, Betty.
Sure. I think it's really, and I found from my 7 years in Canada between Citi and MasterCard, the openness and the willingness to collaborate will really drive across the financial institutions, the fintechs, the payment providers, the processors, and the government, to really understand what technology is doing, how the consumer is moving forward, and that there is a framework in order to be able to safeguard the customer data, put them as the controller of this data, but in a framework by which they are going to be interested in providing certain approvals to use this data in the way that they see fit based on these use cases that are driving, kind of an everyday consumer journey. And, I do believe infrastructure is sexy. I was hoping to get that T-shirt to be able to have, to wear for the session, but it didn't come in yet. The banks do have to upgrade their infrastructure in order to be able to deliver some of these solutions, because I don't think it's only the fintechs. I think it's the huge digital players that provide all of these experiences in their apps and in their, consumer journeys. And the consumer is going to be demanding this type of standard. And I see the banks actually open to understanding that is kind of the writing on the wall, but it has to be done within the framework of governance, security, transparency, and I think Canada is actually in a really good position
for that, and the perspective of being here as well for 7 years at the helm. Hamid, do you want to jump in, and I'll give the last word to Tim?
Of course, yeah, definitely. So I agree with Betty. It comes down to collaboration and how technology companies can collaborate with banks or. One thing I see missing in Canada versus some other countries that have already embedded open banking or other technologies into their financial services is that regulatory or fintech sandbox that everybody can participate, share their point of view, and have that openness approach in how we have these open dialogues through those regulatory or fintech sandbox. And I think that would play a significant role in how we can accelerate with delivering cutting edge technologies in the financial space.
Thank you for that and that suggestion. I think you're right. The UK did a very good job with that. Australia has leapfrogged many other countries, even though they were extremely far behind. New Zealand is jumping fast and forward, and the UAE, let's be honest, they have enough investment dollars and will to definitely drive out some pretty strong fintechs and stronger banks in the future. Timothy, with your perspective,
Sure.
And that would be lovely to close us out.
Yes, I'm so lucky to have married a Canadian for the past 20 years. So I have been really appreciative of a special brand of conservatism from my Canadian extended family. But going back to what Hamid was saying, education is so important and privacy is so important. When we get these two things come across folks' head, open banking, the ability to trust third parties, first parties that deliver this data will be a no-brainer. So I think education is still a big issue here in the United States as well. We kind of forced Plaid, Yodlee, right, decision, all these things onto people all of a sudden. What do you mean I can log into my bank, and what do you mean you can get my information? So I think Canada has a unique position to really start educating folks on what this really is and all the things that what Betty said could do once we have this open, once I have a really trusted relationship between third parties and the banks. I think that's super important. Privacy, in a certain sense, is super important. We kind of just went ahead and started running. But I think Canada, Latin America have a super unique position where we kind of see what US have done, but let's educate our folks to really understand how powerful this information could be. That's my point.
I think you're so right. Canadians are conservative, but there is 4+ million already utilizing it today. I think the goal is really just to try and teach them, what the advantages open banking can drive them. It's not what has been marketed, which is your data is going everywhere because it's open. It's actually protections. So instead of unsecure open banking, which I think is currently live in Canada and the US, it's secure open banking with data rights and rules. And I think that's why I'm still not of the mind that open banking is here. I think open banking is broken and maybe here, but it's not here to protect our consumers at this point or our business owners. So I hope that this discussion helps whoever joined us understand a little bit more about the open banking landscape. Thank you so much, Betty, Tim, and Hamid for your time and your insights.
Thank you so much.
Hope we get to speak again. Have a
Thanks.
great
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Great
Bye.
chat.
Bye.
Care.
Thank you.